What's up, folks? I haven't really tucked into Warhammer combat cards in a minute here, and there's a ton to cover. So if you caught the live stream yesterday, at the time of this recording, there was a teaser about two new Warlords released, and these are Warlords, not Supreme Commanders, and that's important when you actually look at them. Let me see if they're both here. And they are Hatred's Embrace, the new Chaos Knight Warlord. And again, it's important to note that they are not Supreme Commanders because while they're at the 100 points range cost-wise, their ability is only one part. It doesn't have the two-part ability. That's all friendly cards with a cost of 40 or greater increase all attack stats by 40%, which does stack with Inspiring Presence, Berserk, anything else you have on the board that increases your attack stats as well. So you get a pretty significant increase if you stack that. Um, I had a funny moment on the stream. Somebody was commenting that Chaos doesn't have cheap Medicae to kind of go in to compensate or compete with the other factions who have those cheap, low-cost Medicae cards to keep this stuff alive. And my stupid joke at the time was that it's not Medicae for the Medicae god. You know the line. Chaos is very aggressive, very much about aggression. So they have Medicae cards, but their Medicae are more functional at other things than Medicae and other factions. So yes, they're expensive, but they do other things, and Medicae isn't really a big focus of the faction. So I really like this one. Comes in at Legendary with both Big Game Hunter and Psionic Blast. He's the first Chaos Warlord to get Psionic Blast, one of the few Warlords in the entire game to have Psionic Blast. I think one of only two, right? The only other one is the Turvagon, and with really phenomenal stats, plus the trait applies to himself. So you take all of these and add 40%, and then you also can stack on your Inspiring Presence. His hit points are somewhat low relative to the cost, but that kind of balances out how stupidly aggressive this thing can be at high level. And then on the Emperor's side, Servants of the Emperor, I don't have him, and I'm not sure he's visible yet. I think I got an early copy of the Chaos one, so we'll just go ahead and roll with that. Let's see if he's in here. He wouldn't be in the bodyguards, but they've repurposed Canis Rex, who's one of the only named, fairly famous named knight cards, to have basically the profile that the old Red Might had in some of the old campaigns. Now, obviously, these aren't the Supreme Commander Demon Primarchs that we were expecting, but my understanding is that all of those are coming, which is very exciting. So we do have to hold off and wait a little bit longer to get Fulgrim for Slaanesh, but it sounds like we're going to get all of them coming down the road. Excited to watch that. But there are a couple of other things to cover too. And right now, there's a Hatred's Embrace campaign going on, which is an opportunity to see this guy, at max freaking level. And this is what I put together just to really double down on his ability, where every single card in this deck benefits from that plus 40% attack stats. I've got a durable Inspiring Presence in here who will both benefit the whole team and then also give the gain the bonus from Hatred's Embrace himself. Now we do also have balance patch changes and information about the Knight Warlords themselves, but I'm going to play a couple games here and then I'm going to try to read through these two at the same time. So we're looking at the new season that will start on March 17th, which is very soon actually, so I got to get on my ladder play. Greetings, citizens. With the decadent host only just passed, the deafening noise continues as the war horns of Knights ring out. Both the Knights of the Imperium and their twisted cousins will take the field. Boop. We've got a dual faction focus this season, upcoming season, with both Servants of the Emperor and Chaos getting the spotlight. Get a lot of target acquired over there, buddy. This is going to be a little sad. Given the broad scope, we've narrowed the focus down to the largest cards in each faction to stick to the theme, extending this to the other factions by reviewing some of the most costly cards that aren't Lords of War. We've also picked out a small selection of cards from both Servants and Chaos that are currently struggling for a quick spot balance as well. So let's get stuck in and balance changes. I'll get to that in a second. Let me finish up this match first. But check out these stats. 254 psychic damage with max level Psionic Blast on top of a body that has max level regen. It's crazy how much damage that does. And we'll just go ahead and do melee here and just utterly wreck the field. So yes, you make thin decks with the Hatred's Embrace. It's clearly designed for the 400 deck points. But it slaps. And that was a really early level of the campaign. I don't expect to do that well. There he is, right there. There you go, look at you. I don't expect to do that well through the campaign, but it's pretty cool to see. And there's enough there to work with that I'm really excited to try Hatred's Embrace in the ladder to see how far we can get. If you followed my videos for any length of time, you know that I love a challenge. And Hatred's Embrace certainly does present a bit of a challenge, but he's a pretty pretty phenomenal warlords. We're going to do one more of those, and then we're going to go ahead and tuck into the balance changes. And then there is a blurb on the Knight Warlords themselves, so I can talk a little bit more. Oh, nice. Nice, nice, nice. Love to see those. Little Blood Angels cards. Death Company, no less. Ooh, man, that was a great pack. Okay, one more of these just to really highlight this Warlord in play. One thing I really enjoy about this is a very powerful, very expensive Warlord, but is pretty straightforward to play. Just has great stats, raw stuff to put on. So if you want to just throw a deck on the table and feel that like big, beefy cards deck, you can't go wrong with this guy, which is kind of fun. Now, we'll talk about this in the Knights balance patch discussion too, but the two Knights are essentially mirrors of each other. So and this is something you may remember from the campaigns that they both appeared in before, where both of them were limited time warlords. And I'm probably going to lose my Lord of Change here, almost certainly going to lose my Lord of Change here, and we'll see if that impacts the game. Now, it's still a max level campaign. Nice. And we're going to lose that Lord of Change. But yeah, so the Servants of the Emperor version, that Canis Rex Warlord, let's do it. Let's put him on the table. I love it. And let's see how these stats play out. I'm going to do utter murder over here. So the Canis Rex, the Servants of the Emperor version, has a defensive buff. So instead of that offensive buff, all cards over 40 points get a defensive buff and all damage that they receive. I believe it's got a limit of 3, if I'm not mistaken. I'll see where that is. I'll see if that's in the balance patch to make sure I say the right things. But yeah, just pow, pow. And it's important to note that Hatred's Embrace does not have any sort of defensive ability. So you're going just all in on offense, really punching stuff. So yeah, you got to prepare for that when you're building decks around it. And I'm curious to see how it does in the ladder, the 200-point ladder, especially since I'll have a low-level one. So I'm really going to have to lean on my high-level other cards to balance that out. So I'm excited to deck build with that and tech with it. But let's get into the balance patch changes. So first off, we're going straight to the Chaos Heavies. See if we can do this. And this is almost exclusively the top level one, so I can sort by cost. So first off, we're seeing Eternal Wrath, which is you right here, buddy. This guy's going to get -2 cost. Okay, so go from 60 to 58. Plus 10 range. Nice. Got a good base range. It's always a tricky one to squeeze in because it doesn't have any defensive abilities. And at the level I'm at, it's pretty vulnerable for those points. So, and it's got the range buff, which is really good with Supreme Commander Abaddon if you want to go all in on range buff. Yeah, so excited to see that one get a little more play. I'm guessing it just doesn't have much of a play rate. As the first appearance of Chaos Knights in the game, Eternal Wrath is somewhat showing its age compared to the new Knights in the roster. And while still only a lesser war engine as a war dog, you're a good boy, you're not a lesser anything. There's definitely room for improvement, hence this season's buff. Next up, we have Decima, the Knight Rampager Dreadblade, this guy right here. And even at level 3, look at that thing at level 3, like, woof, getting plus 20 wounds, plus 10 melee, and plus 10 range. Holy cow. Okay, before you put him in with Hatred's Embrace. Yeah, probably warranted. Again, probably doesn't see a whole lot of play, and certainly has potential as one of the coolest models in the entire game, both on the table and here. This is one that would definitely, it's good to see some love here. On the other side of the scale, the Decima is one of the new releases, but a bit off on the power level. So we're moving the new and old ends towards the middle to be more on par. A bit off the power level compared to other options. To make sure all your Knight options are viable, we're adding a few more stats all around to keep them a viable option. Cool. And this one tops out. Pretty crazy there. Also top that, and he's got a lot of hit points. I think that's actually more than Hatred's Embrace. But yeah, add to this Inspiring Presence and Hatred's Embrace buff, and you got a lot of damage, especially with that big Game Hunter really helping take down the big targets. Next up, we have the Lord of Skulls, who I think actually got a buff recently, but here's another one. Zukul of the 8th Reaping. Lord of Skulls, -7 cost. We'll put him under 100. Nice. Although already targeted by a reduction in cost, the Lord of Skulls still struggles and is quite clearly outshone by some of the other Chaos options for Lords of War. Probably just a really low play rate. He's in sort of a weird spot where he has a really strong ranged attack, but he's really focused on melee, and especially until you get to that higher level here, you're probably taking him in melee decks, and really if you're focusing on melee, you just have better options. So the reduction in cost is good. At high level, obviously he's incredibly powerful. That max level Berserk plus max Barrage plus these stats is pretty terrifying. Yeah. You get clearly outshone by some of the other options for Lords of Chaos options for Lords of War, so we dropped another hefty amount of points off because space is more of a premium when it comes to these big cards rather than stats. Yeah, true. In most decks, you're only going to see maybe one or two of these, and even in the 400-point Apocalypse decks, it's pretty rare to see more than one or two of these guys in there. Usually you have your like 30 to 40 point slot filled up and then a couple big ones to round it out. So there's a lot of competition for those slots. Next up, one of my favorites, all the way at the opposite point spectrum. Where are you, buddy? Honored Gorzak, the Possessed. And he's somewhere, and I passed him. I know I passed him. Where are you, buddy? The model change still throws me off because I remember the old one. -2 cost, so he's going from 18 down to 16. Also really good because this guy has a spot. I talk a lot about Supreme Commander Abaddon. He's really good in a melee-focused one as a budget pick for good hit points, good base melee, and then also benefits from Berserk, even if he's hit with the automatic damage that Supreme Commander Abaddon puts out. But yeah, the cost is a bit of an issue. Changed last season with a number of lower Berserk cards, the stats up cost up approach might have been a bit much on the cost. So we're taking Gorzak's new cost down by a little while still keeping the intention of him playing as a more valuable piece. Yeah, so his points went up with a big stats buff, which was challenging to squeeze into those decks because he still is playing as a chaff piece, even with the improved stats, even with the he's still playing as a chaff piece. And so it's hard to justify a chaff piece at 18. 16 is still a stretch, but I think there's enough utility for him, again, especially in those melee Abaddon decks. So if you're going in theme fully melee Black Legion, it'd be great to see this guy see more play. Ooh, next up we have Kraruth, which I love because the model is super cool. This guy. If I recall, the first ranged Chaos Marine, and especially Black Legion one, like a very range-focused Chaos Marine, aside from Ka, the Thousand Suns. Kraruth, Black Legion Chaos Marine, will go +2 cost, up to 14. Ooh. +8 wounds and +10 base range, so his base range will go from 42 to 52. Whoa. Well, excuse me, 38 to 48. That's still really, really good at level 1 to get that 48. Now, the challenge I always have with this guy is he's squishy. So even if his damage is good, he's going to die more or less a turn or two after you play him. So having that precision shot be more impactful matters. Having his base damage higher is going to matter. So we're going to see him punch considerably harder, especially at the 14-point cost range. This is another case, though, where he's still kind of a filler chaff card, and his stats don't really justify making him any more. So the points increase is going to be tight at 14 because that makes him compete with these guys up here in the 15 slot that have whole different kinds of utility. He'll be punchier and do more damage, but that does put him more in line with Drekva. So seeing those two together, that's cool. I like it. There's definitely been some more play ranged Chaos decks this season. I'd love to see it. And Kraruth has a clear midline filler card, that should be a staple of these kinds of decks, is noticeably below the curve. He's newer, he takes a while to level, and his stats, again, are low enough that you need him at very high level to justify taking him over some other picks, especially if you want to squeeze in the points to put another big shooter in the deck. It's hard to justify the little cheap ones with that in mind, especially, as commented before, with the lack of defensive traits in Chaos. Could be fun to do a ranged Glogothrox deck to benefit from that and have those guys both be impactful and also feed the damage debuff, but I haven't tried that personally. I should now. Ooh, next up we have Gibberfleth. Gibberfleth. That's hard to say. This guy right here. Another one as another cheaper Berserk card that keeps kind of moving up and down. He's common, still levels strangely slowly for a common. It's taken me a really long time to get here. Whoa, going -30 wounds and +20 melee. That's a huge buff to base melee. And again, with these being percent increases, that's going to be a good chunk of extra melee. The reduction in wounds is an interesting choice, though. I don't know if he was getting too powerful at some point. It's a little bit hard to imagine, but cheap melee Berserk could be really, really good in a Ahriman deck, where you just flood the board with cheap Chaos stuff, hit it with Medicae, and then let Ahriman's random buff heal it occasionally to keep it punching. That could be actually a lot of fun too. Another issue struggling Berserk card, Gibberfleth, has the highest HP of any card in his cost bracket. Well, come on, you want that. But still doesn't get enough benefit from that pair with Berserk to find much play. Yeah. By shaving a reasonable amount off its wounds, and that again is base, so as it levels up with all these level upgrades, the total wound pool isn't going to shrink by that much, even with a -20, -30. Well, it is going to shrink, even with a -30 base. We can give it a massive increase in base melee, which is really good, cutting the reliance on Berserk to ramp damage and allowing for a more immediate impact on the board. Another really excellent one in your melee Abaddon decks, but what really keeps me from picking this guy personally is the melee debuff. Because Abaddon's ability to do that automatically trigger everyone's ready after you kill an enemy card, the melee debuff is not anywhere near as valuable as the melee buff. So when I build those decks, I go all in on a specific type of buff, whether it's psychic, ranged, or melee, and this guy doesn't make the cut because of that. But yeah, I mean, this will make him a better pick. I'm curious to see, and I'm definitely going to try these guys a bit and see how it works out once they're changed around. Servants of the Emperor. That one. Back to the high cost range. We have another knight. Yeah, we have another knight. We've got Gamma Lance. Oh, and this is actually going to be, I'm real close to getting this guy well, he's my highest level rare card in Servant, so he's getting my current flow of wild cards. So excited to see this guy get a buff. Because he's decent, but a single trait card on the expensive end is really competing hard with the other stuff. But we'll see here. It's getting plus 15 melee and plus 15 range. Just a flat buff to attack stats. Wow. Okay. That'll be pretty good. You'll see a very big bump in melee with the double level ups there and a good bump in ranged here. As the oldest knight representation in the game, just an armiger. Okay. Gamma Lance is long overdue for a significant buff. Its identity throughout the game has been as a balanced heavy hitter. Yeah, I love that balance of ranged and melee. And we aim to preserve that by increasing both attacks equally, meaning it's a serious contender for a reliable damage dealer no matter what attack type you're using, and one that a lot of players should have at high level. Also true. Talked about him being my highest level 1, so yeah. I'm already using him in some decks just because he's so high level for me that it is potentially very helpful. He would benefit a lot from the defensive buff from the new Servants of the Emperor Knight. And then we've got the Carnivore, another one I like, but mine is a good chunk lower level. So I've only just recently got this level to where I use him a little bit more. Carnivore, House Terran, Armiger Helverin. Plus 20 range and plus 10 melee. Okay, so reversed, he's getting a bigger buff to range, but a lower buff, but still a buff to melee. You're gonna feel that ranged buff because all of those damage levels are ranged. Similarly, Carnivore is on the older side, being released at the same time that the Chaos Knights were first added to the game. And, well, you can always do with more damage, yes, especially on these larger cards and with a lot of Servants of the Emperor competition for the hard-hitting barrage cards. Buffing Carnivore seemed fair. Also, with a solid melee attack, Carnivore is perhaps the best all-rounder barrage card in the roster. It's fair. Compared to a lot of mono-attack monsters that the Imperium's artillery can bring to bear. The challenge there is always the cost. At 58, he's on the more expensive side, and you look here, you see he appears, well, actually that one's, you know what, okay, so he competes with these two. These three, excuse me. And of course, I think this one, yeah. Yeah, okay. I like it. Next up, we've got Blue Devil, and this thing scares the bejesus out of me because it's a duplicate of this, but with better stats. Seeing Blue Devil, this one is going to get -2 cost from 84 to 82, which still makes it quite high, and plus 10 base range. Plus 10 base range. So its base range is going to be 80, which is very quickly going to bump over 100 at level 2. Yeah, wow, that one's going to be punchy, especially if you have a high level one, you put it in a Supreme Commander call deck. Well, another newer Lord of War, one of the newest ones in Servants. Like Decima for Chaos, that is perhaps a bit out of whack with other similar Lord of War options, and so the Bomber is getting a slight buff to bring it in line. Now, looking at that, if I get this guy leveled up a little bit, why would I ever take this? I mean, yes, you get the melee and maybe more hit points, but if I get this guy up to like level 6, it just blows the other guy out of the, I mean, it's dramatically more expensive, but the combination of the ready and that attack stat, like that's pretty solid. All right. All right, we got Amalia Novena, which is one of the Sisters of Battle, one of the cheaper ones. One of the older ones, no. This is one of the weird ones that doesn't really, she's a little bit on the expensive side, so she doesn't make the cheapest chaff. And I'm leveling her more slowly. So this one I actually run quite a bit in random decks all over the place. Where are you, Amalia? I need the search. There you are. I've got her really close to max. She's got good balance stats. She's getting -3 cost to go down to 12. Okay, all right. So that puts her 1 point more expensive than my personal favorite, Baccaria. Oh no. Okay, she got cheaper. Okay, I got to keep up with these changes. All right, an absolutely classic card that has gone from a staple card with a wide number of decks. Really? Okay. to the second from bottom win rate card in faction. Ooh, ouch. How far you've fallen from grace, Amalia. Shields are always going to be useful, so no need for a trait rework, and the key area for the competition is going to be with cheaper utility cards. Taking the price point down a comparable position in that pool makes her a much more valuable pick. Okay. Then we got one of the walkers, and I may not have this one. I may not this one. Yeah, Scony. This one is going down 4 cost from 33 to 29. Okay, that'll be pretty good. Put her around this spot here. Put him. I don't know. The Sidonian Dragon, the anti-infantry one. This is one I made a case for in a ranged. What was it? The ranged Yarok deck. This could be a really good take because it has the good range stat, but also has the counterattack melee stat and really good hit points for the cost. Like, could still fit neatly into a Yarok deck if you have a high level of this one and want to do something cheeky. So -4 cost, yeah. The Scony Walker has been on the cusp of the lowest bracket for a long time. And while it has good stats, as a rare card bringing only Scout as a trait means that the limited utility is quite a premium. Bringing this cost should help, and we'll see if this lower cost and comparably strong stats is enough for it to see more play. And we've got Logan Stone, one of the cool ones I'm really excited to level up, one of the cheap inquisitorial buddies. All right, Logan. Logan, there you are. Getting plus 10 wounds and plus 5 range. Wow, that's pretty great. I mean, for a 9-point card, the stats are already very good. Awesome in a Greyfax deck if you just go for all inquisitorial henchmen. I'm sitting on this one because I still only have level 4, but I mean, get up here, and I'm definitely taking this card in with some Greyfax decks. Also, just love that double pistol combo. That's very high risk. Yeah, pretty cool. Inquisitorial Pistolier. Another newer card, but one that's been in circulation long enough for it to be competitively playable, and it's been struggling compared to the other inquisitorial agents in the same set. As such, Stone is getting a small all-round buff. Pretty good buff for a 9-point card. And it's interesting to hear that because this isn't just play rate, this is win rate. So apparently this card is being used and just not performing well. So we'll go there. And then let's bump around down here. And we're looking at the more expensive side, so the Knight equivalents for Tau. We're going to start with this one of the classic cards, Chazvray Dasan, one that is one of the most common heavy-hitting Tau cards in the game. You see it all the time. I'm surprised it's getting a buff, but -6 cost. Whoa! So it's going to go to 78. As mentioned in the introduction, we were also looking at big cards in other factions. The Riptide was one of the Lord of the War class cards before the Lord of Wars were widely introduced. And since that time, the Riptide's costing has put it in that bracket without actually being one, sure. So yeah, that's fair. As such, we're slashing its cost to place it out of the Lord of War bracket and hopefully give this card a place in more competitive lists. Now the challenge is, Tau have so many really good middle, like 40 to 50 cost barrage and heavy hitting ranged cards. This guy's a little tough to justify, even though he has the high hit points. He's got a really good melee stat at this level. He's just a really strong card, and this guy, especially in on-Va decks, is just an absolute beast. But yeah, most of the Tau decks rely a little bit more on efficiency, and so his price is a challenge. But I think the stat combo is actually more of the challenge. Like Precision Shot and Shield isn't as good as a much cheaper Barrage card that has a really high range stat, comparable range stat or higher with Barrage. With the different abilities that Tau Warlords have, it's a little bit harder to justify this guy, but I do still see him see play, and I personally play him a lot. So I'm excited to see that one. That seems good. Seems good. Ooh, interesting. Now we're getting straight into the Necrons. Looking at this guy, Timeless Resistance is getting plus 30 wounds and plus 10 range. Wow. All right, just a tank. No comments on that one. It's just done. Then we got the Dynastic Decimator Pylon, which I have never seen played. Plus 30 wounds. Wow. Okay. The Necron Lords of War could definitely do with a bit of a tune-up, and we've opted to hone in on the more resilient theme of the faction for both, with each receiving a boost in wounds that should make a difference. Nice. Okay. Cool. Yeah. And then we go straight to Tyranids. This is good because I'm trying to get through these. And okay. All right. So we're seeing first this guy, the Scythe Terror Duel, getting -6 cost, going down to 78. Cool. That's nice. I just got these. They're low level, so I don't really play them, but I'm excited to try them out when they get higher. And I do see them see some play, so that's cool. The aesthetic is still very much Forge World. It's funny. It's like a prototype of the current aesthetic for Tyranids. So while when they were released from Forge World, they felt like a very modern, cool, interesting take, now they feel a little bit retro. Yeah, still cool. Now the Barb Hyrule is also going down 6 to go down to 79. 79. Both Hyruduals fall into the same category of being in the Lord of War price bracket without actually being one themselves. As such, both are getting a good price drop to take them below the 80-point mark. So the 80-point mark is your Lord of War mark, and hopefully make them both a lot more viable and look less out of place trying to compete with the Lords of War. And as ever, we have the list of cards being added to the general pool. Ildari. We have this thing getting added to the general pool. Servants of the Emperor, we have the Servo Skull. Ooh, yeah, we got the Arbites, Adeptus Arbites. These are cool dudes. And I don't think I have any of them, so this is exciting. We've got the Servo Skull being added. That one. Shifty. Love the name. Then we've got this guy. And I'm having to look at these. Oh, these are such cool models. So I'm excited to see them just for the Arakan models. This guy. Look at this guy. Niche. Man, Voidmaster with a little boarding gun there. Oh, and then this guy, this crazy looking Electro thing. This guy. Electromaster, another rogue trader that could go well in an inquisitorial henchman thing. And then we've got the Death Cult Executioner. Look for ones I don't have yet before I go to that. We're looking at. Sorry to do this, folks. This one, Sister Aveline. We've got the Arbites that I mentioned. We've got the helmeted dudes, cool looking police breachers. We've got Mirrored Strolk. We got Dana, who's too cool for a helmet. And we got Changaz Gonderson. This guy. All those guys right there in that little points bracket. Very nice, very nice. And of course, we have the Cyber Mastiff. Crazy looking thing. We got robot horses. We got to get some robot dogs in there. Wild. Maximilian. Nice. That's cool. So there we go. We're going to go ahead and pause here. Well, I'm going to go ahead and go through this. And we've got some more follow-up. I may do another recording to keep going because there's a ton to cover and I only got half through it, but I do have to go. So till next time, we'll be back. What's up, folks? And we're back. So real quick, I'm going to take a look at, I'm going to do some, let's rewind here. So we looked at the Chaos Knight Warlord, non-Supreme Commander, but expensive Warlord that just got released. Did some gameplay. Did not get a chance to show up the synced PvP campaign with Battle Scars. Unfortunately, I did play with him a bit and I was immediately stomped, which is pretty funny. I got into like the worst possible matchup, which was a really stout Eldrad deck that was able to psycher me right back and just like nuked all my key cards and then killed Hatred's Embrace itself. So I wasn't able to try more than the one game. And then when I played Canis Rex, I got timeouts 3 times in a row. So I went 3-0 with Canis Rex where my opponent just timed out. So I literally never got to see him played. But he went undefeated. So there was that. But let's see. So I wanted to cover the Knights update article that these came out with. It's short. So it said, in this latest Warlords update, we're excited to introduce not one, but 2 new Warlords, introducing Hatred's Embrace for the Chaos Knights and Canis Rex for the Imperial Knights. With the Demon Primarchs on the horizon, plural, all of them, we wanted to bring the Knights to the forefront ahead of the upcoming Chaos releases. Both of these Warlords are based on existing models and have been long-time Warlord concepts since they were in some of the campaigns for a long time where you get to play as them as your Warlords. Some veteran players might remember their origins as early event Warlords, which I constantly forget how long I've been playing this game, so I am one of the early players, long-time veteran player. There it is. Available exclusively in the original Apocalypse campaign events. Now with some adjustments and updates, these Warlords are making their full-time debut in the roster. It's a fitting time to release them, especially as Apocalypse has evolved into a fully fleshed out game mode. These Warlords specialize in enhancing the biggest cards in their faction's arsenal, reinforcing the grand scale of warfare the Knights embody. Just like in Lore and on the Tabletop, where Imperial and Chaos Knights are reflections of each other, these Warlords share an opposing take on a powerful rule. Hatred's Embrace we already looked at is plus 40% to all attack stats for any card that's 40 or more in your deck. Canis Rex does reduces all incoming damage by 25% for cards that are 40 or more cost. So he does have that defensive trait. It is not limited. There was a bit in the stream where there was talk of this trait versus Vol's trait and about how Vol's trait is limited to only 3 triggers, while this one's not, and how that sort of figured into the balance of it being 25%. It may go up, who knows? But that does make sense to keep it from being a little bit too oppressive, because I think the other comment that Harry made was that it does stack too. So it stacks with fear, it stacks with shields, it stacks with regen, stacks with taunt. So you can have some cards out there Like if you end up with a shielded taunt card with this guy in there, it's going to be practically impossible to take down. Yeah, so hence the number seems a little bit low, but when you factor in some of the other extra traits going on and then the overall hit points of cards that expensive, it's a pretty significant buff. So these abilities ensure that your most formidable units become even deadlier or significantly harder to take down. While their power is undeniable, their impact will be most felt in apocalypse seasons, where they can command a full roster of heavy-hitting knights. In smaller 200-point ranked battles, their presence may be less dominant due to their cost and conditional buffs. The Abominant Hatred's Embrace will be available this Friday, so that was this past Friday, after Canis Rex falling shortly after on March 28th. Their hero, so I got a very early copy of this guy. Hello. Their hero packs will also be the first to introduce 2 new legendary cards with a brand new Knight Lord of War, one for each faction. Ooh. Cool. So there's that. Okay, so that was the last article I missed. We covered the bounce pass changes. We looked a little bit at Hatred's Embrace, but I'm going to do a little bit more with that. It's the end of the season. I'm recording this in the final wee hours the night before the turnover of the season, and I still have to get to Terra. So I'm going to go ahead and play this. It's funny, with both of these, I want to do some 200-point ladder decks. With Chaos, because I'm actively laddering Chaos right now and can actually stress test it at the somewhat upper end of the ladder play. And then just because I'd like to try them both. And then with Servants, just because it is also added in. So I've been finding with these that you end up using 1 or 2 cards in that 40-point range to use up basically all of your points. Your 100-point Warlord plus 80 points of bodyguards. And then you have very little to play in there. And you can see with the Canis Rex version, I've gone a lot more defensive and leaning into ranged. So Barrage to help clear out additional cards because I'm going to be outnumbered. And then Fear for the defense and a little bit of Inspiring Presence because I just hit level 9 here. And then a mix of Medicae and Taunt to help keep them alive. But then also for the end game, Canis Rex has that Barrage Inspiring Presence stack, which is pretty gnarly. Of the two, I do think Canis Rex is going to be more competitive, but I still think Hatred's Embrace actually has a higher ceiling of the two. So I don't know. I'm not going to do a lot of Apocalypse because really those decks kind of make themselves. It's pretty easy to build with these things when you have 300 extra points to put with them. So this is a 200-point ladder play. I haven't been laddering Servants this season, so I think it's like 1100. Yeah, 1100. Look at that. Against Supreme Commander Call. Yuck. Okay. So we put out our expensive cards first because we want them to get the maximum benefit throughout the game. And I've got very few cards, so I need them to have an impact as early as possible. He's going to go down real fast. Got those shields up. And now I'm unsure how this is going to stack with Call's ability. His minimum of 60%. Well, no, so that will mean that the defensive fear from this guy is not as good, but the base minus 25% is still going to trigger here. So his fear, instead of being 45, is going to go down to 15% to max out at that 60. Yes, 25. Yes. All right, we're going to shoot him. All the damage. And wow, they really are not taking this guy down. Are these guys really low level? Yeah, they're really low. Okay, so this isn't really a fair matchup, but hopefully it does highlight some of what this deck is capable of and the damage it can take. And we're going to play 3 matches of this, and then I'll switch back to Hatred's Embrace, because Hatred's Embrace is the one I'm, again, actually laddering with. But you can see how durable these cards do get. And they're already pretty high-level cards, so they already have really good oomph. So you can see how it is possible to play these in the ladder. I hate to see it when it's all the 3R packs, when you're about to turn in for the night. But yeah. So that was one match. That's not going to affect my ladder points because I am not high enough points with Servants right now to be in my top 4. So yeah, and this also is, Canis Rex is also in theme with Servants of the Emperor getting defensive traits just in general, as opposed to the offensive traits that you see in Chaos. I personally find the offensive traits more interesting, but I do think that you perform better with the defensive traits. So we'll see how it goes. Okay, now we have an over-leveled, high-level Psyker deck. We'll see how this goes. We see a lot of that reconnecting. We'll see how this goes. It's been a wacky month for internet. Hopefully that doesn't get me in trouble here. Ooh, hello. We're going to go ahead and just reduce those attacks right out of the gate. And already it's a pretty tough matchup, but we'll see here. So he took 12 damage. 12. Let me slow this down a bit so we can see this damage buff come into play. I want to see, oh, that's too slow. I want to see what it looks like when this guy starts taking damage, because it's just, so he took 22 instead of the 29. I'm just going to keep on the Medicaid train for a bit here. So it took 12 as opposed to 15, and then 43 instead of 57. So you're seeing the effect trigger, but 57 going down to 43. 57 was already reduced by fear. Okay, that's, yeah. So 57 was reduced the additional 25% by Canis's trait. But yeah, you can just see how sticky these guys are. And I don't know if it's going to win me in this one because my Canis is low level. So, and this guy's hitting hard. Yikes. Okay. I should have this. All right, we got a reconnect thing. Yeah, I should have this pretty handily, but you can really see how sticky these cards can be with that fear. And there's a lot less hesitation to throw your expensive fear card just straight in front of the most powerful opposing card because he'll get that double defensive bonus, which makes a lot of difference in making sure you still have stuff of meaningful value on the board when it gets to the end game. Oh, shields, yuck. Okay, well, good thing is we'll fairly handily take out the other two. And we should have enough sticking power to not lose either of these, because both of these guys would have been dead multiple times over in any other matchup where I didn't have the defensive buff. So like 94, I've saved way more than that damage over the course of this game. Ahriman could usually probably one-shot something with this many hit points if I hadn't just reduced both of those attacks by 25%. So they are definitely going to be felt more impactfully in Apocalypse play, of course. But in the competitive ladder play, they are pretty darn good. If you picture what I just did, but swap out, make the Inspiring Presence one cheaper and make the Barrage card be the really scary 70-point Super Barrage Precision Shot card with a bunch of hit points. Like, there are ways you can build this around a single super powerful card to make that really, really truck. And I feel the same about Hatred's Embrace, and I'm going to switch to that ladder deck after one more match here. So that again was Canis Rex. We're going to do one more. And one thing I really want to highlight is that it's really hard to make expensive warlords work at low level. I did my Lion challenge recently, and that was a very challenging fight. And I want to say my Lion is level 5. So these guys being as scary as they are at level 4 is pretty impressive. And I think that their ladder competitiveness was actually undersold. Again, especially with a level 4 copy, they're pretty good. And if I got up to level 6, 7, 8, or into like, if you get a max level one of these, they're going to be pretty devastating in the ladder. Because of their variety of traits and how their traits impact themselves, I think they're actually better than some of the Supreme Commanders in 200-point ladder play. This should be a pretty easy matchup because Azrael's not very scary. We'll see what's in there. And with these thin decks, downside, they can get pretty repetitive and boring if you're playing the same stuff every single match in the same order every single time. But upside, you pretty much always have complete control of your deployment and draw. Like, you know which cards you're going to have available, and you'll know, that you'll be able to play them. And this guy's so good at this level, like with that defensive buff and the fear and his combination of ranged and melee plus inspiring presence. Like, he's a really, really good piece. And I'm a little surprised I don't see him more often. He's epic. He takes a really long time to level up. So it could be that a lot of players don't get him to that level or just have him at lower levels so long that they don't think about him once he hits level 9. I don't really know. But I almost never see him see play, and he's a crazy powerful piece with the variety of things that he can do. There's really a spot for him at every single archetypal deck. At his cost, they're probably better specialists that hit a little bit harder in either ranged or melee, but having that flexibility on him is really, really good. Any second now. Sorry, folks. I'm pretty sure that this time this is me on the internet side. It's not combat cards. But yeah, so I'm really enjoying both of these. Again, after this, I'm going to switch back to Hatred's Embrace, and I'm going to get the rest of the way to Terra, and we'll see how long it takes. I don't expect it's going to take very long, but we'll see. Now that could hurt, because he is going to switch attack types here, and so he is going to hit me pretty hard. But it's level 3, level 2 Azrael against Canis Rex himself. Probably got this. Oof, man, ouch. But yeah, like this barely even felt that. And that was a pretty devastating shot. So then, boop. That's good melee on a barrage card. That's funny. Boop. And I do have a little bit of a bonus. I'm mostly talking about these Knight Warlords, but I'm going to touch on something else real quick just to do a break in the middle. And that is, I did a couple challenges for myself on ladder play. I didn't necessarily stick to them very much because I didn't actually ladder very much. There were a lot of campaigns that were really fun that I was mostly stuck on, and that ended up being what I did most of the time. Yeah, it's been a good season. I've been enjoying this one a lot, just sort of low-key liking what's going on and where the game is, but not necessarily like over the moon excited about individual pieces here and there. Just generally happy, which is cool. I like that. Um, good spot to be in. Yeah, so there's that Canis Rex deck. And again, if you build this around a single really hard-hitting card, you could make that work as well. So instead of a 40 point, you go like an 80 point, and then all of these guys, you would get one more like 2 to 5 point card. Yeah, it could be a lot of fun. But the kind of interlude I wanted to go ahead and step in on is one thing I talked about doing was laddering to Terra with Uthar the Destined. And I have done that, and I got comfortably higher than I've ever gotten before, in part just because I have high level cards, with all of my things pushing their third level trait or mostly into their secondary trait. I've got level 8 epics all over the place. But there's one really key thing, and that is getting to this level 6 melee upgrade. Before that, he just does not have the hit points or the staying power to really make it through the end game. And then, especially if you're at 4 or earlier, like you're not getting anywhere with those stats and that damage. Once you get here, he's a really good brawler and really good at closing out games. So my entire deck is ranged, so I build up a pretty good melee buff by the time he gets out. He's got the couple shields to tank some hits, so by the time we'll go ahead and play with him. By the time I actually deploy him, he's almost always able to one-shot the opposing warlord by hitting for like 160, 170 damage after they've taken a little bit of damage themselves. It's a pretty strong deck, and I've been really enjoying how successful it is, considering I was not confident it would actually work. And the faction's been fleshed out a little bit to the point where this actually works pretty well. Oh god, Call. This is the single worst possible matchup for him, though. Hopefully it's the shooty one, because if it's the pure Psyker one that's just Psykers and Taunt, it's really hard to crack that before you run out of stuff. And okay, and they have low enough hit points that they don't really care if you're getting the bonus attacks on them. Okay, this is the best possible draw I could have, because with no taunts over there, that'll let me actually get some kills before other stuff starts. Oh, nice. Okay. So for the record, the strongest or the most obnoxious, hardest possible decks to break through for Call are going to be your like super taunt ones, where you have like every single possible cheap taunt card and all 3 of the area effect psychers. This should be a lot easier to tank through. Yeah, so we got all 3 of the psychers. We got this guy and the Medicae instead of. So he's now got 2. Let's see what we got here. So he now takes 54, which is pretty good. Let me go ahead and go here. Just because you can't ever take down the Psykers if they're tanking so much, because the healing combined with their, and he's going to 3, man, you're going to just take the damage. Yeah, okay. So that should be enough to take these guys down, and then this death blow may be impactful. This still is going to be tight. We'll see how we do and see what else is in there. Nice. Nice. Okay. So we got Call himself on the board before Uthar's on. Oh, okay, cool. So no taunt. Wow, no taunt Call. Interesting. That's a bold choice, buddy. It's probably, oh, did melee. Okay, all right. Nice. So that was very helpful. This still is going to be tough. I got to hit him really hard, really fast, and I may not be able to punch through his healing before he is able to take me down, but we'll see. And this is what I mean. Against most warlords, I'm hitting for the better part of 200. We go ahead and debuff that range so I don't just get completely eaten alive here. And he's healing for 12, I think I saw. So with my extra buff and his reduction in hit points, I may have enough, not enough. Okay, we'll see if we can wear him down. So he's healing 412. Yeah, okay. Oh no! Okay, so it's a really bad. I should have been watching my health a little more closely. But yeah, so Call is the single worst possible matchup against him, especially the heavy taunt one. But I can't I can't leave it at that. I gotta play another one. I apologize, folks, for taking the time on this utter tangent before I get back to Hatred's Embrace. But this has been really fun and it has been really effective. I just happen to show like the worst possible matchup. Um, and that thing is Uthar works because you have controlled attrition, right? So you get to feed cards that you want to die, and then the kind of tougher cards are doing damage that whole time. And then, oh, okay, this is better because there are bigger power pieces that feed the trait more. Oh man, that's a terrible draw though. Yeah, so talking about this, I have double taunt, so cards that I deliberately want to lose. And then I do have this guy in here who's a cheaper piece to buff my melee for the end game, but then also is really good to feed that trait of making your opposing cards take extra damage. And I've gotten to the point where it actually works pretty well. And the faction getting the second taunt is huge. When we only had one taunt in Votann, that was the last time I seriously laddered with Uthar, and it was really hard, obviously. That's not what I wanted, but okay, we got two of them. And so now this guy is now taking 32. And this is a good matchup because Badruk really doesn't take... Badruk has thin deck. So once I kill one of these, then I should be in much, much better space. And he's now taking 2. Yeah, okay. So now we're going to plant my big, heavy, high hit points guy over here. I'm going to place you here, and we should comfortably take out at least one of those, if not two of them, in this, because they've taken so much damage from the Ancestors thing. Yeah, okay. Now the downside here, though, is that I'm pretty low. So he's taking 49. He's taking 76. Let's try it. Okay, good. So that should be, if he doesn't die, which he's gonna, there we go. All right, and now I should fairly comfortably be able to finish off Badruk himself, even with shields down, because he does 83. No, I do 205, so I can almost kill him outright, but that range debuff will help. Hopefully, I have enough hit points to survive this. I do. Excellent. Okay. Woof. Skin of my teeth. That was another bad matchup, but you can see how that can... Oh, man. I almost really messed myself up there. But no, so you can see how it is still a powerful deck that can compete with tougher things up there. The more top-heavy the deck is, the better. If there's a Lord of Change on the other side of the board, you can be pretty stoked about it because you're going to just nuke that thing with your Judgment tokens and make sure it takes a whole bunch of damage. But now let's go ahead and switch back to Hatred's Embrace so we can see if we can ladder with that. And I'm going to go ahead and look at 2 decks that I built for him for the ladder. And I may also look at the campaign still open. I believe they all ended before I was able to record this because it was out this weekend. But maybe when... Well, actually, take a look at that. Yeah, they're still up. Cool. Okay, so I was actually not able to do... Oh, let's do another interlude. While we're on interludes, let's take a look at this. So this was actually a lot of fun playing with Gaz, but I'm going to go ahead and look at just like what I lost. Artemis, Endless Heavy Artemis was really good for a while and then just couldn't make it. Rakarth was terrible. Rakarth does not hang at 400 points. That life gain is just too low. Greyfax I actually really enjoyed. I did a whole lot of like 9-point Endless cards, just like your Endless and ranged cards, and that was actually a lot of fun. I did several wins with her where just like every card had 180 hit points and hit for 50 damage, mostly with barrage, and that was fun. And then a bunch of endless just really to stack it through there. So that was very effective, actually. And then I lost both of these guys because I had to try them. I think I had to disconnect this one. So I had 3 games that I won because my opponent disconnected it, and then I timed out and disconnected for that one on the third. So that was fun. Hatred's Brace, again, I lost in that first match because I had a really tough matchup. And then looking at this, I really, really enjoyed the synced PvP Battle Scars. I didn't initially see that it was Desperate Allies. You could do anything from any faction. I thought it was just like one faction limited, or even if it wasn't Desperate Allies, if it was just any faction you could take, but you only had each warlord was faction locked, it would have been harder, which I think would have potentially been better because it would have been harder for other players as well. Um, but this was an easy way to do this and kind of try it out. And you can see all my endless cards definitely went through there. But man, it was a good time. I really enjoyed this. The Battle Scars, I think, was a really fun way to do sync PvP, to force people to be a little bit creative, more creative and weirder. And one of my favorite moments was I was in the queue with one other player and we kept matching up against each other, I think 4 times in a row. And he was running a thick, scary Eldrad deck. And so every time I would go up against it, I would take out some of the key pieces and get to Eldrad himself, but then I would end up not making it. But I got to see all these different evolutions and variations of that deck in repeated matches before finally taking it down. But it was pretty great going through that process, more so than I would have expected. And so I really, really enjoyed this. Glad they tried it. So, and the thing is, too, I completed the track with a good chunk of losses, and I still have so many cards to pull from. And one thing I'm a little embarrassed about is most of the ones I'm missing are ones that I probably would have used anyway. So I was able to switch between some of my PvP warlords and end up kind of playing the same decks as before because I didn't settle on a warlord too much, and I was kind of jumping around all over the place. But it was that's the Desperate Allies thing, is that I had enough flexibility to lose a lot of cards and still do pretty well. This guy, absolutely incredible in a Gaz deck. So Gaz up here, I think I had the Wraith Knight and this dude in here. Those two side by side are just absolutely terrifying piece. So that was fun. Oh, no bonus on you. Anyway, I'm not actually going to play one of those because they can be a little bit slow. In this one also, I'm not going to spend the plasma to reset this. Those final matches are pretty challenging. I got one strike from a disconnect, one because I played something stupid, and then one because these last matches are genuinely hard, and so I didn't go through there. So yeah, let's jump back to the ladder. And again, I'm not going to do Apocalypse just because I really think that that's pretty easy to build for these things in Apocalypse. But let's go ahead and do the ladder and see just how I can get with Hatred's Embrace and just comment a little bit, because I did drop a couple deck builds in the Discord and got dunked on hard. Well, I mean, like 2 guys said something mean and I got sad. Yeah. Um, Yeah, but so let's look at 2 kind of archetypes here. And this is similar to what I talked about with Canis Rex, where you have the one card that is super buffed and everything else built around it. Now, this deck, obviously, if I hit Big Game Hunter, if I hit a bad draw, if I hit something I can't get through, this deck is really, really vulnerable to just falling apart completely. And this is kind of the route that I was pushed to take, like the only way to play Canis Rex and ladder. Number 1, don't. And number 2, do something like this. And now I personally didn't find that to be true. I tried a fair number of games with this. We'll go ahead and try it. And then I'm going to show what I think is actually a better build. And obviously, I've said before, I'm pretty sure the Lord of Change is the single best card in the entire Chaos faction by a pretty comfortable margin. Giving it a flat plus 40% to its attack stats is obviously incredibly powerful. But it also is pretty vulnerable because it can be hit with target acquired, it can be hit with taunt, it can be hit with just another psychic deck. There are a lot of ways that it can be shut down, and so it can't be your only big fish. You need other things in there, which is part of why I think Logothrox is the most powerful warlord in Chaos. I said it. Because he's so cheap that you have a lot to play around and can add a lot of support pieces and different strategies with the Lord of Change, but also because the Lord of Change can be put in less dangerous situations, because if you have really scary stuff, you can feed it chaff and reduce its overall attack output so that your end game Lord of Change is a little bit safer. So you don't have that with this. This again is just like I said earlier, this is Blood for the Blood God. This is not Medicae for the Medicae God. So it is, change is fickle. Yeah, playing the Lord of Change is fickle. And this should be a pretty easy matchup because I'm way over leveled here, but we'll see. I appreciate playing this matchup against the Akaran, so I don't get scarier Akaran later. And now there is a key thing here to really get the most out of this. You do want to make sure you have both your heavy hitter and then that you also have um, Inspiring Presence, because that total combined does this. So he's hitting for 180 psychic damage, and that is including your Psionic Blast. But you're really quickly going to see the problem here. You already probably can see, excuse me, that my deck is really thin. My Warlord is already peeking out of there, and there's a good chance he's going to appear on the table sooner than later. And now this does work. Let's see if I can get through this. But this also highlights this is a bad matchup for any thin deck, any thin top-heavy deck to go up against Akaran. Hatred's Embrace does have an edge here. There's that big Hembunter directly against my Lord of Change. And here, because it's Akaran, I can't remove it right away. So we're going to go ahead and do this. Yeah, so Hatred's Embrace does have the advantage against Akaran, both having a psychic attack and then also having Psionic Blast. So you'll automatically strip a shield at the start of every turn, no matter what you do. And look at that, like that again. This is level 4. This is level 4, and he's hitting insanely high with those starting stats, especially with Inspired Presence on the board, which is still on the board for now. And this also, unfortunately, or fortunately, I suppose, is an ideal matchup for this deck build, where I'm going up against an Akaran deck with my double Psionic Blast. My other deck is going to struggle against that a little bit more, but I will, I think, still prefer it long term, and I think it has more legs than this does. And let's see how many. Speaking of legs, shields are down. Okay, that should be a lot easier. And I still do want to play this a little bit safe, but because he's got a pretty big melee buff here, he may actually be able to finish me off. No, okay, good. Now, if that was a higher level Akaran with that melee buff, it's possible he could have dealt that 150 or so damage that I had on Hatred's Embrace and actually taken him out. So that is a concern, but that is one win. So you can see how it does work in the ladder. It's not super ineffective either. It's pretty good. But again, this is a really thin deck. If I ran up against big Psychers, if I ran up against a Vol deck, if I ran up against another Call deck, I would be just completely toast. So one thing you have to do to really get the most out of ladder climbing with a deck like this is clear opposing decks fast. And I personally found that this deck does that better. It's this one here. And so you can see I have swapped for double taunt. I've got extra psychic here split between 2 different cards with a little bit of extra durability too. And then Karn is my kind of main damage dealer, just really getting punchy, going in on that blood for the blood god thing. And now I still only have 1 card getting that actual damage buff, and I could flex this to be 2 40s and some cheaper backup cards, but I really love the utility of Psionic Blast, the double Psychers, and having that poison to really push the extra damage through and help me deal with Akarans. So this is what I opted to go with, and personally I've been finding this to be a lot more effective than the Lord of Change version. Now the complaint I heard was that yes, once Karn goes away, you don't do any damage, which isn't true. I've still got double Psionic Blast and decent psychic attack stats and poison that can hit an entire board. But also Karn himself is doing, we'll look at the actual numbers, but I believe I'm going to see close to 200 damage every single hit. He has Furious Charge and he has Death Blow. So his ability to clear multiple boards is easily underestimated and is an important part of why this deck is effective. I mentioned one of the bad matchups is Call, just because it's hard to push the damage through to actually deal with those bodyguards quickly. And Karn does enough damage front loaded that you're able to actually make an impact early and still kind of get some progress there. And Call is a pretty good sort of yardstick as one of the single most challenging decks to beat at any game mode and any game level. This also is hopefully a good example here because both I've got the psychic damage, but then also I've got so much melee damage that I'm not going to charge the melee on some of this stuff too much before Karn kills it. And we'll see about that. Like I should be able to one-shot that, and I am going first. Yeah, okay. His Furious Charge was for over 100 damage, and he hasn't even done anything yet. Yeah. To be able to one-shot a 200-point card is no joke. And that's something that even the Lord of Change can't pull off because its single target damage isn't that high. And then here I can switch tax a bit, which I kind of am going to need to because I need to kill these fast. We're still going to kill that guy on the left over here. And I'm going to lose my Inspiring Presence, but then we'll drop another Taunt. And you can see how quickly that deck is folding, and this is where you start putting down your, you make sure Karn is in the middle, so that when that death blow goes off, you get the maximum impact for it. Oh man, okay. And so here we're going to let this sit a little bit, and we're going to lean on the Psychic. This is a pretty tough matchup, just because of the sheer number of bodies that Onva can put on the table, and that you can spread out those damage stats across a bunch of different pieces. But I do want to highlight here that I'm not really in any danger of losing Karn anytime soon. I'm comfortably killing these opposing cards, and we'll get to Onva himself fairly quickly. And even if he does pull something off to kill Karn quickly, it will cost him his entire board. And that's kind of the things that I wanted to highlight with this. We can do this. And then poison will kill that. Yep. And so the utility of a level 3 poison on this is huge. So there's a lot of different things that led me to building the deck this way, and I think that it is really the best way to do it. So, and if, again, level 4 Hatred's Embrace. If I did this deck with my Hatred's Embrace being closer to like level 6, this would be a scary deck. And it already is. Like, and this is a thing too, is like I wanted to emphasize Hatred's Embrace base stats. So I'm sitting here, I come on the board, he's already swinging for 200 damage and 300 hit points. He's already shooting for 150 damage and still has that 330 hit points. Like he can do absolute ruin, and his psychic is only 24, but still, it's stuff. And this again was kind of a tough matchup because as I'm pouring melee damage into that, it's pouring back into me because it's on Va. So that was a uphill fight that went just fine. So yeah, and I do think at like upper Terra, the really scary levels of play, he's going to have less impact, right? Where Hatred's Embrace isn't going to be the guy that carries you all the way through to top 1% of play. Can he ladder effectively though enough to have fun? Yeah, absolutely, and arguably better than the Primarchs. I would argue he's a little bit more effective than the Silent King. Yeah, there is nothing wrong with this as a ladder warlord. We got some packs. We got some packs. I love opening the packs. Didn't get a whole lot in there. That's right. So 2 games should get me into Terra, unless something terrible happens and my deck is ashamed. But we'll try it again. And I would love to hear folks' feedback on this. I think Caliber, one of our really elite players, had put together an effective deck that he was trying out as well. Yeah, so I'm curious to keep exploring it. I'm enjoying experimenting with it, true to form, and I think that it's a fertile space for theory crafting. And now we've got a really thin, very high melee deck. We're gonna have to see how this goes. What's he gonna play first? That, okay. Now I don't want to fight that head on, even if it's only level 8. Yep. So we'll have to play this one. Okay, cool. And so this is exactly why you bring your poison blasting card. You bring it to take down something like this. And that. And there's that off angle hit. I wonder. We're going to go ahead and do this. I do think that Karn still has enough melee to punch straight through this. Straight through Jane Czar. But we're going to play it safe and lean on the Psychic on this one. In part, I want to do that to play this extra safe, but I also want to do that to demonstrate how powerful Karn's Death Blow is, even as a fallback. So he can basically kill that. Yeah, we'll go ahead and do this. Oh, I didn't even get to do it. Oh, good, okay. So I'm going to get to do that Death Blow against the Avatar itself. And let's see if we can one-shot him. And if we can't, this may be a really horrible mistake. And not quite. But then that's basically going to die. Got that here. And then we've got Hatred's Embrace. Do we have this? I'm pretty sure we have it. I don't think the Avatar by any mile can do that 300 damage. And he's chosen not to. Instead, he's going to take psychic damage and die. And he did, because Big Game Hunter. Yeah. Yeah. Also, let's not underestimate that Big Game Hunter on the even a low-level Hatred's Embrace. It does just like chew through a lot of the scarier things that would normally be challenging in a deck that thin. Yeah, let's get to Terra. Let's get to Terra and do at least one match in Terra to see, because usually there's a difficulty spike when you actually get into Terra. You do find that matchmaking is a little bit more aggressive. So let's see if this holds up. But hopefully I've explained why I've come to this deck build and why I think that it works and kind of the different utility pieces I've put in. Obviously, it could be a ranged thing instead of Karn. But the combination of Furious Charge, Death Blow, and his really high base stats and being over 40 is a really, really good, strong combination to really make this go off the rails. Just look, it's Furious Charge for 100 damage. Yeah. And now here again, we do have to be a little bit careful because I don't really want to lose too many hit points on Karn too quickly. This is a much tougher matchup right out of the gate, just being against Akaran. Akaran's tough. And I would like to get as much utility out of the Poison Clouds as I can before I lose him. It'd be nice to get that poison against Akaran himself, but I'm probably not going to do that. But that's where most of the time that'd be a bigger problem because I really want something to deal with Akaran's shields, but Hatred's Embrace has Psionic Blast, so I have a built-in way to deal with those shields, even if my Poison Psyker putters out before I get that far. So we're going to go ahead and drop you here. And the double cheap taunts, I've gotten them to very high level to where they're really very effective, and that's been very helpful as well. And I think it's still worth keeping the Poison Psyker alive that little bit longer to do this, especially with this guy getting healed up by Medicae. Grub. But there, right there, even just immediately had to take the the second life from Akaran. And this guy, there's some lower levels here, but this still illustrates just how scary some of these decks can be. And now this, so here again, this I want to take a quick pause here and just talk about this. So I am saved from this right flank absolutely murdering me because that guy is poisoned. He's got the Psionic Blast and the poison, so I'm able to take him out on the flank even though I lost Karn already. And that's something I really wanted to highlight is like losing Karn is not the end of the game in this deck. That's really important because that's one of the, when you look at it at first, be like, yeah, well, I mean, it's over at this point. But I've got that level 9 area effect Poison Psyker that is exactly the backup you need in this deck. And it's very challenging to do that any other way at 200 deck points with a 100-point Warlord. So I understand the kind of hesitation to play something like this, but it's pretty good. So let's try it one more time, and then we'll go ahead and call the video, because it's been pretty long between my earlier session and now, and a little bit repetitive, I know, but yeah. Very much looking forward to busting out the Demon Primarchs when they come out, sooner than later, we'll see. Yeah, okay, Illic, this is concerning. I am over leveled, at least against that. I do want to make sure to do the poison earlier. And we want Karn to bust out earlier. Smack. The timing on that is consistent, but also crazy that Karn does Furious Charge before the damage buff applies. And that, I think, is the same thing. I forget who it was. I saw that with, oh, what's his face? Lord Solar? Lord Solar has the same timing. And you can see here, again, I'm over leveled, but this still is a scary matchup, and still Karn is able to just like chainsaw through things at the flank to really clear the board fast. And I am concerned, though, because we are about to see the Warlord himself. And I have to make sure he hits the board before Hatred's Embrace does. And this is where this deck, again, has a little advantage over the other one with the Lord of Change, because my chaff cards would have gotten cleared so much faster, where even if I had the end game advantage, it could basically guarantee that Illic would deploy before, the Hatred's Embrace would deploy before Illic, and I'd have that dead shot on him, and that would pretty much guaranteed kill him. So, smack! One shot the Warlord. There you go. Okay, I'm going to play one more, because that went fairly quickly, and the matchups are definitely instructive, and I'm enjoying seeing that and how it works. So let's go again. Now, if I hit a Vol, either version of Vol, I am in real trouble. But that's true of pretty much anything. Love watching that. He's real close to level 13. Cool. But yeah, and I think I talked about it. I got that level 9 Poison Psyker by pumping every single wild and chaos wild card I could into that for months. But yeah, and I was able to get into there, and it's been a really, really effective piece. And it's cool to see a deck where it's that good. This is going to be an awesome show of whether or not this works, because this is potentially a really bad matchup. Okay. So I'm over leveled, which is really good because otherwise I'd be complete toast. Now this works well because he's only got one actual heavy hitter on the board, and so I have some wiggle room to play around with this stuff. And with this guy in here at 58 points with 5 other cards in the deck, doesn't have a whole lot in there to be really scared about. So if I take this down, I should have an easy breezy time to take down Tolmeron himself. Oh yeah, especially if he's got this guy in there. Although that being a 5 gives him some more points to play with on the other stuff. So what do you got, Tolmeron? All right, more taunt. Okay, there's one other heavy hitter, and that is a concerning one. And then that, interesting. Okay. Ugh. So now let's go ahead and do this, because I'm not actually concerned about Tolmeron as long as I can kill. So you get that Psionic Blast with the big Game Hunter. The damage is basically nothing at level 4, but will add up pretty quickly. So now I've got Tolmeron on the board. If this kills that, if he kills Karn, that basically destroys his line. And yeah, nothing. No issue whatsoever. And that thing I just said about him killing Karn was nonsensical. But yeah, fairly comfortable there. So having the extra bodyguards, hugely important. Having the 2 primary damage sources in the poison and the variety of ways that Karn does damage, super, super helpful. But yeah, and there we go. So I'll go ahead and call it there. Video's gotten rather long, but yes, I'm excited. It's cool to see the Knights. Was not expecting that in the least, to see Knight Warlords added at all. Also, these are the first non-Supreme Commander Warlords added in a long time, and I'm glad to see that those are kind of still on the deck somewhere. We may not see a lot of them, because I do know that Supreme Commanders are a major thing that's being added a lot. But something I've been talking about is Eldari, for example, don't have Supreme Commanders. There isn't one in the Codex again. And so them being totally left out of that mechanic is a bummer. And that's just one faction that would end up that way. I don't think there's one for Votann. Yeah, so I'm loving those. I like the mechanic, but it's cool to see that there are going to be expensive warlords that are of a different kind of class that are still going to come up. So we may still get a new Eldari warlord, which is nice. So yeah, we'll leave it there. Appreciate the time. Till next time.